Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balkowitz. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Answers Shorts. And in this episode of Thyroid Answers Shorts, I want to talk about the connection between mental health and your thyroid physiology. Typically in May, May is acknowledged as Mental Health Awareness Month and Women's Health Awareness Month. So the combination of talking about mental health and its connection to thyroid physiology, probably appropriate. So many people who've been on this journey, on this roller coaster ride of having hypothyroidism, maybe having hypothyroid signs and symptoms, getting tested, being told that their thyroid physiology was normal, or getting put on thyroid medication after diagnosis, continue to struggle with a lot of emotional symptomatology, anxiety, depression, and many times when you have anxiety and depression, but your TSH is normal, you're just told you have depression or you have anxiety as if that is the disease or the problem versus the fact that those things are caused by something. And you may be told, oh, you just need to be on an anti-anxiety medication. You just need to be on a antidepressant. Instead of asking the question, why is the body responding this way? For many women and men who get diagnosed with hypothyroidism and go on thyroid medication, the initial medication does maybe change some of their symptoms associated with anxiety, depression, but in time, it doesn't last. And they continue to have hypothyroidism signs and symptoms, along with symptoms like anxiety, depression, brain fog, etc. And many times you're going to be gaslit to be told it's not a thyroid condition because we've normalized your TSH, or we've normalized your free T4, or we've optimized your T3 levels with some type of T3 medication support. And while the lab values may have become normalized, optimized, it doesn't necessarily represent what's going on inside the cells and tissues. And when we talk about what's going on inside the cells and tissues, we typically talk about what happens there is being dependent on your state. Are you in a state of low stress, what we call homeostatic physiology, or are you in a state of excessive stress and allostatic physiology? So what's homeostasis? Homeostasis is a state where I make all the energy I need from the food I bring in and additional in whatever I have stored as fat to run all of the systems of the body under my current stress load. That's homeostasis. The other operating mode that we operate from is something called allostasis. And this is a state where I don't make enough energy from my food reserves or from my fat reserves to regulate all the systems of the body under my current stress load. And so the body has to make a decision, and it has to defend the most important systems at the consequence of downregulating some important systems, but ones that aren't necessarily important to the crisis or the stress physiology or survival. And thyroid physiology changes depending on the state. And we can call it thyroid homeostasis, or we can call it thyroid allostasis. Okay. And so one of the ways the body shifts from a homeostatic regulation to allostatic regulation is actually to adaptively downregulate the conversion of T4 to T3 and potentially to create more damage to the gland to shut down the overall production. These terms, thyroid homeostasis, thyroid allostasis, sometimes they're complicated and cumbersome to deal with, but I want you to think about thyroid allostasis and thyroid homeostasis, maybe from a different concept. When we're in homeostasis, we have more of a thyroid connection mode. Thyroid hormone, when we're in homeostasis, is all about improving cell metabolism, improving communication between the cells, improving amino acid production into peptides, into proteins, optimizing neurotransmitter production and metabolism, optimizing sex hormone production and physiology. It's all about rebuilding, regenerating, communicating, effective communication. When we're in a stressed state, and we have to shift into this allostatic state, there's a natural decreased conversion of T4 to T3 in a lot of the cells and tissues to the less important systems in those tissues or within those tissues. Many people think this is broken physiology because it creates signs and symptoms, but in reality, it is an appropriate adaptive response. And it's a protective response. So when the cells perceive a drop in energy, they perceive a threat, they perceive danger, and that can come from organisms, toxins, thoughts, disrupted sleep patterns. Multiple things can create this cell stress response. Thyroid hormone needs to change from thyroid communication mode and connection mode to thyroid protective mode. And what typically has to happen is there's a reduced conversion of T4 to T3 inside the cells. This allows for stiffening of the cell membranes, reducing transport of nutrients into the cell that may support an organism that may be in there. It results in reduced ability for the organism that could be in the cell to get itself out of the cell. And it also reduces the energy production of the cell by downregulating the mitochondria, so we can still produce energy, but not produce more oxidative free radicals than we can manage in this situation. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about why do I feel the way I do. Your body isn't broken, at least at the onset. Typically it's adapting to the environment. And if there's an excessive stress load on the environment, more than the body can adapt to, more than your cells and tissues can adapt to, there is going to be a natural shift from this homeostatic thyroid communication mode to this allostatic thyroid protection mode. It's not broken physiology, it's adaptive physiology. If you think about this maybe in real life, like if there was a blackout in a city, then a lot of things are going to be shut down because they're not important to get by, right? There are certain emergency mechanisms that can kick in to deal with the most important things going on in the city. Same with us, right? If I have my house and I have energy coming into it, but the power goes out and I don't have a Generac system to run my whole house, I can pull out my gas generator out of my shed and I can use that to power my house, but I can't power the whole house. I can only power certain things, a few things, maybe the refrigerator, maybe a few lights. That may be about it. If I want to get a hot shower, I can't probably turn on the hot water heater and have the refrigerator plugged into the same small generator. I just don't have enough resources. I can't produce enough energy from that generator. So there's we have to appropriately decrease the energy to systems that aren't as important in the moment and shift that energy to the more important system. If I want to keep my food cold, I plug the refrigerator and freezer in. If I want to get a hot shower, I got to unplug the fridge and freezer, plug in the hot water heater, right? We have to make choices in this situation. And so this is what's really going on for most people. Now, if you just had if you had your thyroid gland damaged for some reason or removed for some reason, you would have hypothyroidism. If you were in a homeostatic state, then taking T4 probably would make you feel and function good. Your labs would return to normal, your signs and symptoms would return to normal, and you'd be doing great. But if your physiology is in this cell stress state, in this allostatic state, in thyroid protection mode, and the gland gets taken out or irradiated, and now you get put on thyroid medication, the thyroid medication will raise your thyroid hormone levels. It will lower your TSH levels. It will, to some degree, raise T3 and free T3 levels, especially if you were really totally depleted. Some cells and some systems within those cells will start to work better, but not everything is going to work well. Why? Because those cells are still perceiving danger. The systems that are most important are going to get most of the energy. The systems that are less important when there's a reduced amount of energy or some type of cell stress inflammatory mechanism going on, those systems are still going to be downregulated. So you're still going to have hypothyroid signs and symptoms. And this is important. So let's get into how ways that the thyroid hormone, your thyroid physiology, and your mental health are essentially inseparable. I mean, if you have cellular tissue hypothyroidism going on, if you're in thyroid protection mode versus thyroid communication mode, and you get thyroid hormone, you may still have hypothyroid signs and symptoms. You may have anxiety, depression. So let's talk about this a little bit more. When your body perceives excessive cell stress, that's going to send signals into the chemistry of the body, into the bloodstream. Inflammatory danger signals are going to be released. These signals, when they get to brain, they're going to tell brain, hey, we're in trouble, we're in danger. And what's going to happen? That's going to result in an increased conversion of T4 to T3 at your hypothalamus. It's going to cause an increased activation of your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight system. And that's going to then send signals that actually causes a down regulation to your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's going to decrease activity of things like your GI tract and your sex hormone glands and your detoxification pathways. It's going to push more energy to your brain and your big muscles. Why? Because that's the most important thing when there's danger cues. Okay. Unfortunately, this is also going to result in probably more inflammatory mechanisms going on. And then those inflammatory mechanisms are going to have a negative impact on your brain. And those inflammatory mechanisms are going to then further reduce peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. And those inflammatory mechanisms may create more cell damage. Those inflammatory mechanisms may actually be some of the triggers that cause the thyroid gland itself to engage in what we call thyroiditis, okay, inflammation of the thyroid gland. There's also a big connection between thyroid hormones and your neurotransmitters, because your thyroid hormones have a big role in your production of your thyroid hormone, or your thyroid hormones have a big role in the production of your neurotransmitters. And so whether it's serotonin or dopamine, these are two of the feel-good neurotransmitters that we talk about. When there's excessive cell stress, there's a natural decreased conversion of and production of serotonin. There's an increased metabolism of serotonin, and thyroid hormone plays a critical role in serotonin production. So if I have cell stress, I'm going to make less serotonin, partially because of what happens to tryptophan in that situation, partly because of the reduced conversion of T4 to T3. And the other component is that you're going to have an increased metabolism of your serotonin. The self-stress mechanisms are also going to create a change in dopamine production and catecholamine production, and really emphasize more catecholamine production, especially epinephrine, norepinephrine, which are your more fight or flight hormones. What's that going to feel like? Well, if you're making less serotonin and you're metabolizing what you make more rapidly under a stress condition, you're going to have more depressive type symptoms. If you're making more catecholamines, fight or flight hormones, cortisol in a stress situation, those hormones are going to be upregulated in the bloodstream at the receptors, and you're going to have more anxiousness, more anxiety. Along with it, you're going to potentially have an impact on a reduced conversion of T4 to T3. And because you have reduced conversion of T4 to T3, you're going to have slower metabolism of those fight or flight hormones. So they're going to stay in the system longer. So under cell stress mechanisms, when you're in a situation where you're operating from thyroid protection mode, there's a general decreased conversion of T4 to T3 peripherally. There may be some upregulation in certain systems and in certain tissues, namely brain and muscle tissue. But overall, the likelihood is you're going to have more depressive type symptoms. You're going to have, at the same time, more anxious or anxiety-like symptoms. And sometimes this is why when people are diagnosed with hypothyroidism and put on thyroid medication, initially it may help their depressive type symptoms. But it's not uncommon to see people that as their dose goes up of their thyroid medication to support a lab value or to manipulate a lab value into range, that they start to complain of more anxiousness, more anxiety, more brain fog, more insomnia. Why? Because the body's in this cell protective mode, this thyroid protection mode. The thyroid physiology is kind of upregulated in the brain because that's how we manage in this cell stress situation. So the adding more thyroid hormone into the system, especially one that's in this adaptive physiology, it's not going to be used uniformly. The cells are going to use it based on what mode they're in. If they're in protection mode, they're not going to convert a lot of that T4 to T3 and make you feel good. What's going to happen is you're going to get more T4 to T3 conversion at brain, and you're going to get more upregulation of that sympathetic nervous system, more oxidative stress, more inflammation. Not a good thing. And this is where people often really struggle, and they're told that their labs are normal. They're told that their labs have been optimized by manipulating the blood levels. And physicians assume that if they can just manipulate the blood levels into a range that correlates with what's happening inside the cells and tissues. And I think most clinicians don't even take into consideration that there are two operating modes, although it's been written up in the literature quite a bit. And so what happens is you wind up in what I call thyroid purgatory. You're better than you were before you got medication, but you're not where you want to be from a health perspective. And when you get into this state, the level of hormone that your doctor thinks you need sometimes to optimize your blood values creates more dysfunction in your physiology. And the dose that you might feel better on, your medical doctor may not be happy with that. Okay. So you're stuck in this place where you feel better, but you don't feel great. And you just don't know what to do to get yourself healthier. There's one more thing I want to talk about, and that is this concept called neuroplasticity. And the brain is this kind of amazing piece of tissue, and it's constantly remodeling and remolding. And when we're in this state of chronic stress and chronic inflammation, the brain has to still remodel, and it starts to change to adapt to that environment. And what happens is that especially when there's altered thyroid physiology in the brain, because of the cell stress response, you're not developing a brain that's the cells that are going to be developed are going to support this chronic stress state. You're not necessarily increasing the cells that are going to impact you for higher learning and cognition. You're going to maybe increase the development of cells that are going to help you defend yourself, more of what we might call a more limbic response. So the more stress and strain you put on your physiology, the more your body operates from this protection mode. We essentially rewire our brains to actually be better, more sensitive, more hypervigilant, and that can result in more long-term consequences. The good news, though, is that we don't have to be stuck there. The brain can still be remodeled again. So if we can reduce what's creating the excessive cell stress, and if we can change our operating state, we can shift ourselves from this allostatic thyroid protection mode back to homeostatic regulation and thyroid communication mode. We can rewire and remodel the brain, which is what we want. And we can finally start to see the cells and tissues peripherally start to recover back from this adaptive physiology to more of a homeostatic state. The next thing I want to talk about is how stress and thyroid physiology kind of create this kind of constant loop. When the body perceives excessive stress, we shift from homeostasis into allostasis, from thyroid communication mode to thyroid protection mode. And this is not broken physiology. It's an adaptive response. If somebody's coming at me with a knife trying to kill me, I want to shift all my attention to survival mode, protection mode, and I want to downregulate the systems that are not important. But we're not meant to stay in this state for extended periods of time. If we stay in this state for an extended period of time, that's when a lot of problems start to occur. We see more tissues getting less support. Then you start to see tissues and systems start to break down and actually become not just dysfunctional, but diseased in time. And so chronic stress shifts our physiology from homeostasis to allostasis. It shifts our thyroid physiology from communication and recovery mode and rebuild mode to protective mode. Once we're in this protective mode, this is when the body has to make decisions. Like there's limited amount of resources, limited amount of energy. This is the primary thing that I'm focused on. And that's when we really start to see the signs and symptoms show up. And I use that kind of energy analogy already. Like if the power goes out and I got to plug in my gas power generator, I have to make decisions as to what's important for me to plug in and provide energy to, because I don't have enough energy in that little gas power generator to run my whole house. So I have to make decisions. And once we're in this adaptive response for an extended period of time, that in itself becomes a stress on your physiology. Because if I'm in stress mode for a while, part of being in excessive stress mode and upregulating my sympathetic nervous system is I'm going to downregulate my parasympathetic nervous system. So what's going to happen? My GI tract's not going to work as well. I'm not going to have as much stomach acid and pancreatic enzymes, and my bile flow is not going to be appropriate. And my GI motility won't be the same. And so what happens then? Then I'm more prone to bacterial imbalances in the gut, what we call dysbiosis. And that dysbiosis can trigger more cell stress, more inflammatory mechanisms that then continue to kind of positively reinforce this excessive stress physiology, and it becomes a vicious cycle that can be really hard to get out of. We also want to talk about how your emotional health can impact the cellular health. So when we have an experience, we have a discussion with a friend or a family member or a coworker, and that discussion starts to get heated, and I start to internalize that. I get angry, I get irritated, I sense fear or concern. That activates a part of my brain called my limbic system. Okay. And when I activate that limbic system, that's my brain, my primitive brain saying, hey, I'm in danger. And this can activate that cell danger response. So when we're angry, when we're moody, when we're fearful, it's not just something that happens in our brain. Our whole chemistry changes. Every cell, every tissue it will change as a response to that. If you don't believe me, and you're a person who does not like to speak in front of large groups, go out and force yourself to go speak in front of a large group of people. And you'll probably realize that, ooh, I am perspiring. That's a stress response. I feel like I'm going to pass out. I feel like I need to pee. I feel like I need to poop, right? Or maybe you feel like you're going to puke. These are all responses to perceived stress of your body trying to manage. I'm going to evacuate my urine and my bowels so that I don't have to worry about that. I am going to throw up the food in my stomach so I don't have to worry about digesting that, use energy there. I may pass out because that may be an escape mechanism. So stress impacts every cell in your body. Whether it's, if you had an organism, that's one thing, infection, bacteria, virus. But when we internalize the things that happen to us in our life, we internalize them. We can internalize that, wow, got in a car accident. That's terrible. And have our pity party and then move forward from that. Probably not a big deal. But if I get in a car accident and now I'm constantly telling myself how terrible this is, awful, how am I going to get to work? That starts to trigger a fear or cell stress response on our physiology that then, if it's short-lived, like I said, that's fine. But if it becomes more chronic and more persistent, then that triggers this whole cell stress, cell danger response. It shifts our physiology from homeostasis to allostasis. It shifts our thyroid physiology from communication mode to protection mode. And now we start to have decreased energy production, and we have decreased repair process, and we have increased inflammation and insomnia, and we start this cycle. This is really what's happening to people. So when we talking about your health, your mental health, your emotional health, your mindset, these things are so important to your overall state, whether you're in homeostasis or allostasis, to your thyroid physiology and your body's ability to get well in time. If what's going on between the 6 inches of your ears is always negative self-talk, negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative emotions, that is going to create chronic stress in your brain, chronic upregulation of the inflammatory mechanisms, chronic shift from thyroid communication to thyroid protection mode. And regardless of whether you get diagnosed with hypothyroidism or not, if you get some type of thyroid medication, it's going to have limited benefit. And I think I want to say one more thing here, and this is also associated with supplementation as well. Many people think that if they just take a supplement, it's going to work in the cells the way we want it to. But just like thyroid physiology changes depending on our state, we use micronutrients in our cells and tissues depending on our state. Sometimes we look at things and, oh, I'm magnesium deficient or B6 deficient or B12 deficient or calcium deficient, when we're not really deficient. Really what's going on many times is the cells aren't going to use those micronutrients because of that cell stress or cell danger response the way we would hope they would. And so this is where people start getting overloaded on supplements and then get frustrated when supplements don't work the way somebody on a podcast might say they should work. It's because the state of our physiology, the state of our cells is going to determine how the outcome of a treatment is going to more likely be. So I want to, we'll do this. Let's finish up with some action steps. How can you improve your mental health, your emotional health? How could you retrain your brain so you're not as impacted by some of life and life experiences and some of the relationships that you have, so that these things that happen to you don't create a higher stress state? And there's some high-tech tools out there that you can use to really calm down the mind, calm down the brain, calm down the limbic system. There's tools like Heart Math. This is an app you can get on your phone, and it helps you calm your nervous system. There's a technology called Brain Tap, which is a combination of light and sound therapy that can really help, again, calm the sympathetic nervous system, calm the cell stress response. There's a wearable device. It's a wrist strap. It's called the Apollo Neuro device. It works through vibration. Really like this, along with the other two things, because with the Apollo Neuro, you can be wearing this in the middle of the meeting, when you're right before you're going to go on stage, or while you're on stage, to calm you down. And nobody would know, right? If I have the Brain Tap as a set of goggles with lenses over them, maybe not something you want to wear at a presentation, so it's less likely you're going to be able to do that in the moment. But the Apollo Neuro you could definitely do. And there's, in practitioner's office, there's all types of biofeedback and neurofeedback, which are all higher cost technologies that can help people calm their nervous system and calm their brain. From a low tech perspective, what are some relatively free things you can do to improve your emotional and mental health that doesn't require any type of device? One of those things is that you can do is you can just get outside in nature more. Get outside, unplug from your computer, your phone, social media, TV, and just get outside and spend more time in nature. I've talked about this before on the podcast. It's one of the reasons I love archery season. So a number of years ago, I started shooting a bow just for something to kind of calm my mind and help me distract my brain a little bit. And then I started archery hunting. And when you're archery hunting, at least for me, you wind up spending lots of hours in a tree stand by yourself, unplugged. You're not watching TV, at least for me, I'm not on social media. I'm really just focused on what's going on in nature. And I think that really helps. That really helped me because there's a lot of noise that's going on between the 6 inches of your ears, a lot of noise going on in your mind. Too often we don't pay attention to the thoughts and feelings that are going on in our mind. Instead, we override them with watching TV or looking at social media or other people's concerns. So one, get outside and get out into nature. Two, turn off all the external noise as much as possible. Limit your time on social media, limit your time on devices, limit your time bringing in the noise and problems of other people so that you have more time to deal with your own thoughts and feelings. Number three, I talk about this in the book, the 30-30-30 principle. And it's really 30-30-10. Everybody who's struggling with issues kind of gets focused on themselves. But one of the ways to uplift your spirit is to not spend time all the time with yourself. Get out there and spend time with other people. And I think you should spend 30% of the time, you should spend time with people who are more successful than you, that are in a better state of health, better level of fitness, eat better, so that some of those actions and behaviors start to rub off in you. And it helps you see what's possible, what's achievable. About 30% of the time, spend time with people that are just like you, because it gives you a sense of community. These people know what I'm going through. These people are at my level. 30% of the time, you should spend time with people who are less fortunate than you, that are struggling with greater challenges in life, whether it's physical challenges, financial issues, social hardships, whatever it is. Not only would you be helping them, but you'll be amazed at how much you feel better about yourself and your own situation when you're helping somebody else. I think volunteering is an awesome thing. And then 10% of the time, for sure, maybe more, you figure out these numbers on your own, but 10% of the time by yourself, quiet time by yourself, so you can process what's going on in your own mind and start to deal with what's going on in there. Number four, definitely increase healthy food. You eat more unhealthy processed food, it's going to create more of an inflammatory process in your body. So if you're not doing it already, switch to a whole food, low processed food diet, something like the Mediterranean diet. Increase your physical activity. Even if you're struggling with aches, pains, problems, fatigue, just start somewhere and add a couple minutes every week to the amount of time you physically exercise every day. And you'll probably be amazed at how much better you feel emotionally, how much better you sleep, how much more energy you have in time. Number six, focus on good sleep habits, good sleep behaviors. Make sure that you're dedicating time to try and get to sleep, get a good 7-8 hours of sleep. And that's critical. A lot of times people are stressed out, depressed. They're sleeping during the day. They're taking a lot of stimulants. They're doing things that really disrupt their sleep cycles. And that becomes a problem. Set a time to go to bed every night and the same time to get up every morning. Get in the habit of having great sleep habits. And then lastly, learn the ability to reframe situations. So bad things are going to happen to you all the time. And it's just inevitable. And if only good things happen to you, that would be problematic too. So when things go wrong, as they inevitably will, and there's problems, instead of, you're entitled to your pity party. If somebody dies, you're entitled to your pity party. But think about how you can reframe every situation so that it can help you become stronger and more resilient. Just because something bad happens doesn't mean it's going to doom you for the rest of your life. If you've had bad parents and then parents that really created a lot of trauma in your life, that could really be a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of people hold on to that trauma and live through that trauma and constantly bring up that trauma up. And they're carrying the trauma that was caused by their parents and their parents' bad behavior with them through the rest of their life, like a backpack of weight. Other people use traumatic experiences and use those as the motivators to do better. I had some challenges with my parents. My parents weren't great people. They were narcissists, whatever. One person might carry that bad trauma or problem with them and wind up actually treating their kids the same way versus somebody else who reframes the whole situation, says, hey, this is a terrible thing, but it's helped me become a different person, a stronger person, a better person. And that has helped me so that I don't treat my kids the same way. So you use this kind of reframing every situation so it can help you become stronger, better, more resilient. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Thyroid Shorts. If you are interested in getting my emotional fitness questionnaire, go to my Instagram page, Dr. Eric Balkavage, and DM me emotion, and we will send you the emotional fitness questionnaire so you can do a little self-assessment of your own emotional health. All right. Until next time, this is Dr. Eric Balkavage signing off. If you've enjoyed this, the Thyroid Answers podcast, and especially the shorts, give me some feedback, give me some comment, either through my social media, especially Instagram. And you can also go to wherever you download your podcasts and give us a rating on one of those platforms. All right. Thank you.